let me talk about Archons for a minute and sort of explain a little bit more about that rare concept. So few people adopt this philosophy about Archons, and yet, supposing it's something that impacts our lives and is real, it has had a massive impact in the last couple decades alone. Archons are a Gnostic belief. They're kind of like the bad guys in Gnosticism. They're akin to demons, but with slightly different rules. In Gnosticism, the divine spark is in your mind. It's the ability to create things. And the Archons being emissaries, little like flying monkeys, for Saturn, who is the demiurge, who is Satan. They have hatred for mankind's ability to create. That is the Gnostic version of the story in a nutshell. So Archons try to distort, obfuscate, abuse, cheapen the creative act. And they are aligned with materialism and money and power that comes from money. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, really. When you see a music project like, say, Crass, an art project like that, anarchists who were profoundly political and actually followed up on what they said and lived in communes and, but all the art that they could possibly throw at the world, some of which is very good. I mean, it's like some of the most legitimate punk rock there ever was. All the art they could ever throw at the world did not save them from old age and, not having financial security, et cetera, et cetera. And you might say that the more inner sanctum of Crass doesn't care about that or doesn't want it. But at least one, Steve Ignorant, the singer on a lot of it, obviously does want money because he reached middle age and he comes out of the woodwork and he's like, hey, I'm going to do a bunch of quasi-Crass shows and I'm going to take all the coin from it. Quite the antithesis. So many times, once we see somebody reach older age that seemed like a maverick of deeper truths or something, so many times they just sell out because they just want the money and they just want to get dragged across the finish line of success and making sure they have a legacy and making sure they have money for their family that they probably have by then and all of that. That's just old age, and Saturn rules old age, by the way. So the closer you get to old age, the more the rules and laws of Saturn will make sense. That being said, Gnostics would make the claim that Saturn is the root of all evil, that Saturn built the illusion that is this world. I believe that something alike to that is true. And it started for me with knowledge of astrology, which I've had for like 20 years now. Nonstop, every job I've ever had, every experience, every place I've ever been, every person I've met, I've been gathering a database of astrological information. I've been learning about astrology, reading books about it nonstop for that long. It really doesn't seem like that long a time to me, but it has been long enough for me to have some level of expertise on it, I think. And I can tell you that the position of a Saturn in a person's chart does in fact inform their work ethic and what they are driven to work towards. What if we all knew that and lived by it? Once again, I believe that they did know and live by it in the Roman Empire, and that's why the Roman Empire lasted thousands of years and America lasted 200. But I assume because of Christianity, we are to forsake that knowledge, but probably not for very long now because it's a known thing. When you look at, it's an easier to know thing because of the internet and technology. When you look at Crass, for instance, a lot of it is anti-Christian works because Christianity is very oppressive, especially in Europe. That's why you see black metal bands burning down churches and stuff, because they take your money and they build a new church. I mean, they tax people and the church is all based on taxes. It's not that far from here where we have the 501c3 tax exemption status for churches. Now, I am not Christian and I'm avidly against Christianity, but I have an Aquarius moon and Aquarius is the sign of that. Okay, so the closer we get to the age of Aquarius, the less Christian morality will matter or be. But that being said, if you were born when I was born in the 80s, and most of what you've seen is that the worst people, the Bushes, the worst people, Margaret Thatcher, always claim Christianity. They always claim that God is somehow informing the things that they're doing. But God is not informing the things that they're doing at all. What they're doing is oppressing new ideas so that old ideas continue their day in the sun. What they're doing is oppressing young people so that older people can fill their coffers financially. What they're doing is creating problems and then blaming the people for the problems that they created. But Archons would have you look at a larger paradigm. Allegedly, according to the work of John Lamb Lash, who goes pretty deeply into Gnosticism, Archons are like gods of simulacra. They are invisible to mankind's eye, but they do torment people. But the way they torment people is complex. It's not simple. It's not straightforward like Christian demonology. I grew up with a friend who had a lot of punk feelings, and he would get like a mohawk, and then his Christian mom would say, "Oh, that's demonic to have a mohawk." Like, I'm pretty sure it's not demonic. It's a Native American culture from which it derives, but obviously it's actually a punk thing. But his mom had the worst impression of Christianity I've ever heard, and this is a woman who allowed her son to be abused in a Christian cult that she joined in the 80s. Christianity is a lie, and that lie is dangerous and violent. It's violent by nature, and it attracts sociopaths and pedophiles. When you look at it through that lens, and you look at the fact that maybe Gnosticism is true, because maybe the powers that be believe or know that Gnosticism is true, then you can see things in whole new dimensions. For one, it's kind of futile to do this Christianity versus the people socialism kind of duality. That duality is a 20th century duality, and the bad guys won, and you're just going to have to live with that, People like Reagan that created the 501c3 were supporting business interests. They weren't supporting religious interests. It just seemed like religious interest, okay? There is no religion in America. There's no real religion in America. If there's any religion, it's the temple of the dollar or the temple of sex with attractive females. Those two things are the most important things in America. Make no mistake, every little boy who grows up in this culture should understand that the two things that everyone is actually fighting for, except for fringe groups of intellectuals who will never be the winners in America, the things that people are actually fighting for, what you're fighting wars for, what you're working so hard for, what you open a church for, is to be around hot girls and to make hella money. Those two things are what rules America. It's deep within the mindset of America to put those things up on the pedestal. If you're an attractive woman in America, you will do better than an ugly woman, period. Doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter how hard you work, okay? If you're a rich man in America, you will be treated better than a poor man, period. It doesn't matter if you're a good person. It doesn't matter if you always pay your taxes. It doesn't matter if you don't cheat on your wife. In America, the vast majority of women would prefer that you cheat on them as long as you are rich and powerful, because it gives them a dimension of chaos that they thrive upon. I know that sounds ugly. I don't claim America as the place that I am or am from or want to participate in, but I'm here, and because I was born here, I always have to pay taxes here until I die, which means that I can either get super rich at best and leave this country, or I can meander as a poor person for the rest of my life in this country. I've been treated very poorly by the government, by my parents, by women, all that, very badly, very poorly, okay? And I don't think it's my fault. I think it's the fault of the ethos of this country and the drives that it instills in people. If I was living in a Buddhist country, the odds that women would have done the things that they've done to me, or parents would have done the things that they've done to me, or government would have done the things that they've done to me, would be very slender, very slim. But because the main prize in this country is, once again, sex with attractive women or money, everybody seeks the same end goal. Everybody is racing the same race, whether you think you are or not. And if you think you're not, you're just far behind. It is an ugly world. I am not an ugly person. There are plenty of people who are not ugly people, but they will fail in the long run because America will perpetually vote for Donald Trump's or Bush's or Reagan's. And the only real reason that people keep voting for those things is because the older generations want the money and they want the sex with young girls. That's what it is. I've heard the arguments and the fights against from many people. And let me tell you right now that stereotypically in America, if you do someone's astrological chart and you see that they have water or earth in their chart, those are the people that are against the conservative movements, while the conservatives are usually stereotypically air and fire signs, or have a lot of air and fire in their chart, because air and fire do not resist their urges, whereas earth and water are suppressive towards urges. And that is how we got here, and that is why it is that way. No matter how modern you think you are, no matter how different you think you are from that situation, that is the invisible truth. Okay, so if you're a fire sign, you probably like the sex part. If you're an air sign, you probably like the money part. If you're an earth sign, you like the money part too, but you're a very oppressive person. You want to stop men from having sexual urges because they had sexual urges about you when you were vulnerable and nobody protected you. If you're a water sign, you want to control the mind of people. You don't want people to abandon you. You want to, control. You feel weak in some way. You feel deformed in some way. And you want to control how people react towards you. And you'll do anything to control that reaction. That's what water is in a nutshell. Again, not every single person with every single position of this kind is like that, but I am speaking some raw-ass truth, like prophet-level truth about these things. Take it or leave it. I don't really care. Air, like Ronald Reagan, like Donald Trump, like George H.W. Bush, air has a tendency to sneak their way into power through reason, through logic, through finesse of words and wisdom. I was able to talk myself out of a bunch of school assignments by just kind of arguing with the teacher until there's nothing they could say about it. And a lot of people were impressed by that when I was younger. But really, I probably should have just been orthodox and done everything the proper way, because at least I'd have a little pile of money to defend myself against the urges and the sinister drives of other people. Not everybody is bad, but I'm going to say the majority of people are bad. They're bad people with bad intentions, ill-informed, low education, abusive, selfish. Ever since the advent of the internet and the cell phone and all that, you will notice that people will just block you because they don't like what you're saying. They don't like what you think. What the fuck is that? They'll get rid of you in their life if they just feel like they just don't have time for you. But you know what they always have time for is TV and screens. And think about that in an Archon way. They always, always have time for distraction, for amusement. And if the system, the government, can give them distraction and amusement, they will ignore the more prescient issues, the more philosophical issues, the more moral issues for sure. All of those things they will ignore. Think of the 1,000,001 ways, if the Archon paradigm is true. Think of the 1,000,001 ways that simulation, simulacrum, computers, all that has been an attempt at distracting us from our nature and from evolving the race, the human race, towards a more developed kind of, utopia. And instead, slowly, we move towards a paradigm where all of our social life exists through an archonic screen, and all of our material life is just working for other people to make them money. It's like a hierarchy that very much emulates what Gnostics are saying Saturn does to the planet Earth. And you could look at Archons as CEOs, kind of that system, because that's kind of what they do. I do not believe, I was raised in a Republican household, I do not believe that at the very top of these systems are like wicked, selfish materialists. Some of those systems, that's the case. But I would say the majority, probably not. The majority of CEOs, probably well meaning. The majority of workers, probably honest. Probably just want to get their work done and go home and do the things that they enjoy. But here's the thing is that the more aggressive the work culture becomes, the less anyone gets to actualize or manifest their true selves, especially creatively. Have you noticed that? That your dad wanted to play guitar, but he just had to work all the time. That your cousin had an idea for a movie, but that he never got to make the movie because he had to work all the time. That is part of the deal. I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing with all of this civilization? Where's it going? When you think about computers, you should think about the Turing test. Alan Turing was the godfather of computer science, and he was also a homosexual. And he believed that he could create a test. Initially, we believe that the Turing test is to be able to test between robot intelligence, basically, and human intelligence. But that's not true. That's not what Alan Turing originally created it for. He created it because he believed that people could not tell the difference between a robot woman and a real woman. That is a subtle distinction, isn't it? That changes the paradigm a little bit. So in that paradigm that Alan Turing had, it was a lot of hostility towards women. And so where you divest from the human element of things, you are replacing that. You're creating a chasm that's vulnerable to outside influence, and I believe that that's where Archon culture kind of snuck in. If you look at Bill Gates and his hatred of the human race and his demanding that everybody have vaccines all the time and all that stuff, we let the nerds win this planet, right? And why were we calling them nerds? Why were we marginalizing them? Because their primary interests were not base interests. Their primary interests were not getting laid and, making money and being a jock and all the stuff that was really rewarded. If you watch Revenge of the Nerds, the movie, there's a lot to glean from that movie. It's a very truthful movie in a lot of ways. Because what it's really about is these borderline autistic or fully autistic people who just best the status quo people, the WASP elite, by empowering their nerdiest likes, thoughts, and desires. But really, in real life, a lot of nerdy people nerd out on something because they fixate on being really good at it. And most people you'll find that are poets or musicians or whatever spend way too much of their life focused on that one thing. They don't live a balanced life at all. It's increasingly difficult to live a balanced life and to be any one of those things. You have to be totally obsessed with it to make a mark in it because there's so many people, and I feel especially bad for people involved in any kind of printed thing because no one gives a shit. It'll just get buried, We are very accustomed to the culture of consumption to the point when somebody makes something because it's coming from their creature, we look at that as something to consume, and we put it through each one of our Cartesian theaters, and we say, this thing is not good according to me, therefore I shall not consume it. That is not how the arts should work at all. But it is how they're working now. The reason why pop music, which is for the majority of human history has been regarded as cheesy, corny, music. The reason why pop music is so incredibly powerful and also financially rewarding in the last less than 40 years is because of a certain system, and that system isn't in place anymore. Michael Jackson doesn't just show up and sing and it's a masterpiece, okay? There's a bunch of players involved, there's a bunch of contracts, there's a bunch of bass lines, there's a bunch of EQing, there's a bunch of mastering, there's a bunch of mixing, there's a bunch of finding just the right room for something, there's a bunch of, eating a sandwich for this period of time and hurry up and wait. There's a bunch of talking to promoters and playing shows and all that stuff. There's a bunch of stuff like that involved in anyone you've ever heard of. And if any one of those elements falls short Like if Sheryl Crow is a great songwriter, but she just didn't have the look, or if, Live have good enough songs and a look, but they're just older than people who are, in their 20s and like sub 41 makes it look cool to whoever likes them. Uh, then little things like that can fuck up the entire operation for something as large as popular music. The vast majority of music is not popular, obviously, and the vast majority of good music is not known or popular at all, especially in this culture. Perhaps the worst thing that happened to American culture is consumer culture, because it led people to believe that something is only as good as their Cartesian logic tells them it is. In the theater of their mind, they think it's good, so it's good. That is dark because pop music producers, like the people who created Milli Vanilli and the people who created Justin Bieber, are trying to make something that has a wide appeal. They're not making something that's really inspired or genius in some way. They're making something that appeals to masses of people. And so a lot is lost in translation there. It's not about making touching pieces of art or anything. It's about making like saccharine pop songs that people will consume, because the consumer base is the main thing they are seeking. Have you noticed that as consuming increases, the effect of the archonic reality also increases? There's more TV, there's more, film, there's more phone, there's more every way that you could consume something through a screen, through a simulacra, a falsehood, has multiplied 100 times, you know. So when somebody has an ingenious idea, like I would say the band Deerhoof is ingenious, everything about it's pretty good, you know. When you hear that, you're like, damn, this is something different. These people are all good. Songs are good. The players are good. It's all good. You would think, well, that's going to rocket them into superstardom, right? But not quite, because the majority of consumer base, they have a very niche audience, I would say. The majority of consumer base is still listening for Justin Bieber because that's what their ear is attenuated to. And that, if you take a step back, that attenuation to false reality is the goal of the archonic system. So take that away. Take away the attenuation to commerce so that you can make other people money by consuming. What do we even have then? You know, should we go live in the wild with animal masks or what? Should we grow our own food, et cetera, et cetera? Maybe. A vast many Americans would not even know themselves if not for the consumer culture aspect of their lives. If the consumer culture faucet gets turned off, they don't know what's real anymore, you know? My mom grew up with TV in the Midwest, and she's very much like that. For whatever reason, TV gives her like some kind of safety or security, and so she will never not watch TV. She's gonna die in front of the TV. I mean, it's awful. I'll be like, turn off the TV, let's talk about simulacra. But she won't, and she gets bored easily and automatically, and so does everyone who's attenuated to that like cut, to that way of being entertained. The MTV cut came about in the 1980s. It was a cut of music videos to make them constantly engaging and interesting, okay? But ever since that style impacted television also. When you watch like Miami Vice, for instance, was deliberately MTV cut. It's cut the same way as a music video so that it looks sexy, appealing, fast-paced, interesting, and then people be like, yeah, the visuals, the this, the that. Now, older, slow burn kind of artists also have a cut to them that appeals to a different crowd. It appeals to me. If you're watching like European art house movies, they have a tendency to have that like long form, slow burn cut that appeals to a lot of people who are the nerds of today, like me. The nerds of now, not the nerds of the 80s, like a lot of European art house things, like a lot of stuff like that, because there's a lot of warmth and like humanity in them that we as children of the 80s and 90s were deprived. We were deprived of humanity and normalcy and, you know, a lot of the human thing that was going on in the 60s and 70s in art house film. But either way, all together, if you make the greatest film that has ever been made today, you might be able to make a living from it. Maybe. You probably won't make film 2, 3, and 4, and you definitely won't make the films that you want to make as 2, 3, and 4. And that is all driven by commerce. It's an ideological difference of people born in the 50s and 40s who believed, like take the producers of the James Bond film series. They became very wealthy because of those movies. And the wealth is reflected in the movies. They're talking about beluga caviar. They're talking about, living in the French Riviera. Wealth is an aspect of the James Bond franchise, right? And it was an aspect for the producers also. They had this dream of producing these movies that seemed really not like a huge deal when they started. The first one, Dr. No, is not that great. It's not that big a deal. It's not that amazing a production, but they really took off. And it's that success that is lacking from everybody from my generation pretty much. Not that many people are very successful because of a lot of bad happenings financially and otherwise, culturally, politically, that have made our whole generation kind of flatten out like a flan or something in the cupboard. But the truth is that the things that become successful in our culture are just deemed successful because a lot of people will consume them. Like, say, South Park, there's a lot of genius to those guys and what they do and everything. But South Park, Family Guy, Simpsons, it's all just based on something that people will consume. And the consumption in the first level of Simpsons, the consumption was based on the fact that it was kind of a spin on sitcom reality, and it still had a lot of sitcom traits. Still had family being put as number one, and emotions, and, like happy moments with fathers and sons and stuff, even if they're, not the billionaire winners of society and stuff. That was still the core of The Simpsons, and that's why a lot of Simpsons is like really touching to this day. But then, of course, it had its 2 and 3 and 4 kind of iteration in Family Guy and South Park and stuff. And those are increasingly hostile towards the family unit, towards simplicity, innocence, honesty, all those things. I don't dislike those shows at all or anything. I'm just saying that what they actually speak to is a kind of denigration and evaporation of what The Simpsons was kind of putting forth. A lot of Generation X people in general, what they were really focused on was like deconstruction of the nuclear family. That's what Generation X was really fond of, that notion. But it's come home to roost in the worst kind of way, because in all of human history, not just Generation X or their parents, the family unit is the way that people survived all of these economic hardships and so on and so forth. If you look at the greatest generation, they lived through a depression. But they stuck together as families, and that is really what is being parodied in these more modern iterations. And we have a tendency to love the parody more than our own families, or more than familial reality or the family unit, because now, because of that television archonic reality, everyone has been led to believe that they are the auteur, that they are the greatest artist and so forth, So surely their hot takes and their spins on different things are the real ones, are the truth, and many will bow before them. And then they won't have to get a regular job and toil until they die, right? But should our entire economy be based on that? Should our entire economy be based on families? Should our entire economy be based on spending your whole body and ability on trying to turn over a buck? I mean, is that really the goal of life and of Earth? I can tell you from knowledge of astrology that it absolutely is not the goal. It is not the purpose of life to make a bunch of money. It is not the goal to make a bunch of money. Each one has an individuated purpose. And there's nothing more toxic to the human experience than being forced to be separated technologically, which is exactly what happened with the COVID pandemic. It's like everybody had to be separated, and then everybody was very much put into little groups. That is very much the government doing that, the nefarious government. It is not normal, healthy lifestyle at all for anyone to stay inside for 2 years of your life. They did that to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. They did that to try to control the economy and create as much control as possible. I urge you to understand the concept of ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos, which is what Freemasons do and have done. Just like in 9/11, which was done by the government, the Freemasons in charge create chaos, and then they instill the order, and then you follow their laws and rules according to the order they have created. And what is left behind is what they want left behind. But what the Archons really are, who may or may not be like somehow affiliated with deep state, black ops government, what they really want is for everyone to experience only simulacra. Do you understand? So they want you to understand the world through TV, through your cell phone, through movies, through this, through that. That takes some attenuating to understand. It does not, you can't just press a button and understand that, okay? But it is key to America at all times, and it is definitely the government doing it. You can read about it. It's in declassified CIA documents and everything. It is core to America to have constant screens in your face at all times. America wants that for some reason. Could it be somehow affiliated with the mysterious ships that started crashing in the 40s in this country? It wasn't in Belgium. It wasn't in Argentina. It wasn't in Australia that UFOs started crashing so heavily. But they did in the 40s here. 40s and 50s was really the on fire time, and it was still happening well after that. Could it be, as some people allege, that our incredible increase in technology has some kind of tie-in to some incident like Roswell? Like maybe there was a crash in Roswell, New Mexico. There's military got involved, collected the craft. There was a living one or two, according to the story, okay? And that being or beings might have informed our government on a larger political structure that's outside of our planetary structure. If that is true, for people who were born in the 40s or 50s where things were much more innocent, calm, made a lot more sense, and then there's just this incredible arc in technology since then, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's a sane and rational thing to postulate about. I'm not saying I have personal evidence, though it seems like everyone who's in the military with a high secret clearance seems to think that it's possible. I'm just saying. Mostly the people who don't think it's possible are civilian people who would have never had any interaction with that kind of thing to begin with. So presume my paradigm of Archons, which is the Gnostic paradigm of Archons, which is much older. The Gnostic Gospels were discovered, known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the 40s, okay? Just like Pluto was discovered in 1930. A lot of things that I talk about are relatively new. They're less than 100 years that they've been on this planet in terms of being able to understand them. So to understand them is to understand a certain avant-garde reality. Okay, that's fine. But the truth of Gnosticism is that it kind of elaborates a whole different paradigm for spirituality that UFOs can fit, like a Lincoln log, into. I mean, it doesn't make UFOs turn into these beings from another world. It turns them into basically Luciferian angels. Lucifer being the god of Freemasonry. Okay, 14 presidents have been Freemasons. There's obviously a Freemasonic symbol on the dollar. There's obviously a powerful coterie of Freemasons that run this government and this country and maybe this world. And those people are interested in Lucifer. Now suppose that Lucifer has angels. that what was described when they were describing angels of Lucifer in the Bible or other things like that were actually extramaterial forces that have taken on sort of like spacesuits. The spacesuits being the aliens, gray aliens, which have no genitalia, they have giant eyes, and every other sense organ is small. It all fits the MO of the potential, the possibility that it's actually just angels, Luciferian angel spirits, that have occupied little spacesuit bodies. I've kind of had suspected something like that most of my life, but didn't really have it to put into words that way. 9/11 was a Masonic ritual. It was not a terrorist attack. You'll probably live the rest of your life with people believing it was a terrorist attack, but 50, 100 years from now, it will be common knowledge that it was the initiation into the New World Order, it was the initiation into like a Luciferian government, blah, blah, blah. People will know that in the future, but in the world today, it scares them, they don't like it, doesn't make them feel good, doesn't remind them of Hallmark television, so they don't want to accept it. But it's obviously true. Well, if that's true, could it be that there might be some correlation between the fact that high-ranking military and intelligence people like George H.W. Bush started becoming leaders of this country as if there is something that they know that the rest of us aren't supposed to know or can't know. They got rid of JFK for some reason, and ever since then, it seems like LBJ was a Mason. It seems like Masons have run this game. Maybe the innocence of the 40s and 50s that was lost centers around the fact that the average person with that kind of simple attitude can't actually comprehend or understand how large a situation we've gotten ourselves into with technology, intelligence. The intelligence gathering mechanism of the CIA is mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing 40 years ago. It's mind-blowing now to the nth degree. I believe very strongly that it's completely possible that there are extra material things going on in the CIA and other intelligence, perhaps unnamed intelligence organizations, where they can probably travel through time or make someone live forever. Those would be stated goals of those groups. I mean, there's a thing called the Gateway Process, declassified CIA document that shows that transcendental meditation is real. Do not trust me about that. Google it and find out for yourself. I've had a lifelong weird relationship with alien stuff. It's always kind of creeped me out, but then I'm also kind of fascinated, like what's going on with that. It seems like an ultimate truth that you want to seek while you're in this world, if it's seekable, to know what aliens are, if they're real, are there other worlds, are there people interacting from other worlds, etc. But my belief at this juncture is that it's most likely that the Archon paradigm is true, that Lucifer has little angels, Satan, Hasatan, Saturn, has little angels that are emissaries of chaos, of simulacrum, etc., etc., that those people might have given us the technology. One of the things that allegedly came from UFOs, if you believe that story, is fiber optic cable. And of course, fiber optic cable is what all of our, cable television and everything runs on. It is entirely possible that those Luciferian angels either took over government or made some kind of agreement with the highest up people in government that they would exchange either their entrance into some kind of intergalactic reality, their entrance into some kind of heaven-like reality, or their entrance into like some kind of immortality paradigm. They exchanged that for control over this world. And the control mechanism that they require to take over this world involves everybody on a phone, everybody's location known at all times, everybody's face and identity under watchful eye, all-seeing eye, if you will. I believe that that is the truth. There absolutely, undeniably, is a tie between Lucifer and Freemasonry. There's absolutely a tie between Freemasonry and the secret government. So if you put those two steps together, you can only presume that it's entirely possible that somehow Lucifer has a hand in the machinations of government. Once again, that is not a crazy conspiracy theory. Please read 2 or 3 books on Freemasonry. It's the reason why the world is so different since 9/11. Okay, it's the reason for all the legislation after 9/11, which basically took away all of your constitutional rights and made you like a slave to this materialist thing. It didn't overnight make it so that there's no more terrorism. It didn't make it so that, the Middle East was wiped out and there's only the free and fair world that we live in. None of that. Your college professor doesn't know, okay? Your local politician doesn't know. The only people who could even possibly know were people who were high up in the military, high up in Intel, possibly high up in the Ivy League school system. But all three of those fit the bill for George H.W. Bush and a few other people who were in government, and they made the decisions they made, including flatly lying to you about the invasion of Iraq. Look into the Naira testimony. They flatly motherfucking lied to you to get you to do that because they're governing over you. They're not your friend telling you the truth. I'm your friend telling you the truth. They're just governing over you, telling you what to do and making whatever kind of TV show possible that you would believe it and you would go invade Iraq. Now, Iraq, of course, is the original human civilization. Babylon, Iraq. If there was some kind of intervention by aliens at some point in our society, it probably started in It probably started in Babylon. In Babylon, there are all these freaky gods that seem to center their culture around the pine cone or the pineal gland, as many people think. The pineal gland may be responsible for imagination. It may secrete dimethyltryptamine into our brains, which allow us to dream. Could it be that the Gnostic paradigm, which was informed by that region, could it be that the Gnostic paradigm was handed to us by some sort of higher species? Could it be that the original Christian paradigm was also handed to us by some larger species and that they're both bastardizations of the same thing, but that same thing has been highly degraded, twisted, all that, from years of people in power like King James, who was a Freemason, dementing the truth about that? I mean, astrologically speaking, you can see that Ezekiel's vision is obviously about the fixed signs in astrology. He saw wheels within wheels, and in the wheels was a bull, a man, an eagle, and a lion. Lion is Leo, eagle is Aquila, which is the old name for Scorpio, man is Aquarius, and bull is Taurus. Okay? Those are the four fixed signs of astrology. Those are the four, warrior signs. Why is that the vision? How many people today read the Bible all the time but don't understand that those are the fixed signs of astrology that he's talking about? So much of the Bible is astrological. There are 12 apostles and 12 astrological signs. The age of Pisces was a 2,000-year period that started when Christianity started, or Jesus was born, if you want to believe that. It just so happened to be the age of Pisces that, with all the Piscean imagery of Fisher of Men and all that. It's obviously astrological. How could they know those things before there was even telescopes? Someone had to tell them, who maybe had advanced technology. If there was a civilization that had more advanced technology, like I've heard the argument that Egypt was actually a whole nother culture before the ancient Egypt that we understand, and that whole other culture before Egypt had a lot of advanced technology, might have been the forerunner for what we conceptualize as Atlantis. Well, that could be true. And if that were true, then from Egypt we got Tarot, which we did. From Egypt we got our understanding of astrology. From Egypt we got all these means of kind of seeing the face of God, if you will, because that's what they were obsessed with. Why wouldn't you be obsessed with that if you weren't perpetually watching TV, working like a dog for the boss man, working for the company, betting on the dice you're tossing, that you're going to have a fantasy? I can tell you one thing about knowledge of astrology. It's like looking at the face of God. And when I'm on Instagram here and I have just, I'll add people that have nothing to do with my personal life. I'll add this Aries guy who's a men's rights activist, and then I'll add this, fervent feminist, just to see what their life is like. What do I care? It's not, I don't have to agree with them to add them on Instagram. That's something that's totally misunderstood by boomers. because of their conceptualization of consuming, which tells them that if, it's like a TV show they don't want to watch to see something on the internet they don't agree with. But that's not how my generation is. Which may also be Archons dividing and conquering their attention. You can go on YouTube and see very fake, very AI renditions of Barron Trump. And he's singing songs about how America is great. There's a whole contingent of boomers who watch these videos and believe that it's actually Barron Trump. Look at the comments. You'll see they cannot separate between AI and... That is so scary that they're like that. I know they're older, but is that really the reason? I think the reason is that they're utterly accustomed to seeing things on TV and believing the things on TV, which may have never been true. Presume for a second that Apollo 11 was fake, that the moon landing was fake, that Kennedy said that we were going to go to the moon, so Nixon had to make it happen to restore that kind of belief in science and technology and everything else, and American patriotism, everything that Republicans always do. Obviously, Nixon, not an honest man, okay? He messed with the election process in Watergate, so he has proven that he is not honest or square. Without getting into all the reasons why people believe the moon landing was fake, there's quite a few, and the more the technology progresses, the more light is shown on several of them. So presume it was fake. Even if it wasn't, presume it. Honor a hypothetical for a minute. Presume it was fake, okay? All of these boomers who watch it on TV totally believe it. They believe it fervently. They believe it like, if you question it, they get violent, they get nasty, they get really mad and angry because they're really proud of this American moment, I guess. But I don't really have any of those feelings of patriotism or, yay, we did it, we went to the moon. I don't have any of those feelings. So the truth is all I really care about. Astrology, for instance, numerology, all that kind of stuff will show you a very obvious and easy truth. It takes less than a year, I would say, to fully be able to do astrological readings and, numerological readings. Like, once you have a grasp on it, you see that there are many truths that are not common knowledge. And if you try to say astrology is real, my friend, like if you're a rational person, you try to say that, you'll encounter a million children of Neil deGrasse Tyson who are just convinced Pluto's not a planet, astrology is not real, it's ridiculous, it's egomaniacal for you to think that the stars have anything to do with you. That is Neil deGrasse Tyson's perspective, a very erroneous, false, easily proven false perspective. However, I'm not saying I can prove that Archons are the actual gods of this world or little angel demons of this world. But I can prove that there's a long history of Masons keeping secrets about who's actually in charge and all that stuff. The Masonic cipher is something worth looking into in a way that they hid the whole time that Catholics were in charge of this world. The vast majority of the history of Western civilization is one religion controlling the world and then being conquered by another religion that controls the world for a longer period of time. That's mostly what it is, and every one of those people who lived and died under that paradigm, suppose Catholicism is not true at all, because it's not. Everyone who lived under that paradigm would have said, well, obviously God's great, and blah, 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 and obviously the Pope is the leader, and yada, 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 yada. To this day, if you try to challenge those things, no matter how many thousands of people children are raped by Catholics, you still face adversity like you're really just doing a horrible thing by calling out the Catholic Church. Like it's the stupidest linchpin of society we have going on. Until Islam takes over, then that'll be the stupidest ever. But honestly, and in reality, this archonic reality seems like the tightest thing I've ever discovered in terms of like it's all there, it's all together, it's all observable, it's all true. I don't have to believe in a man who lives in the clouds like Catholics do. I can literally see that there's an incredible influx in technology ever since crash craft were collected by the U.S. government. That seems like Archons, doesn't it? So suppose the moon landing never happened. All those people believe it because they believe the image, not their own truth, not because they sought out truth, not because they are interested in deeper truths or secret hidden truths.
None of that. They're not interested in that shit. What they're interested in is pop image, popular things, because they're Pluto in Leo. They like things on television. They like movies. They like popular things. It's their generation that ushered in Elvis and the Beatles and all that shit. So that popular means good. But the people who actually were the Beatles or the Sex Pistols or the this or the that, who were popular, who were famous, who were rich, they don't prioritize fame. Look at John Lennon, for instance, a Libra with an Aquarius moon. He did not prioritize in his life the famous part. He prioritized the political action part. He prioritized the love part. He prioritized stuff like that. But he did not prioritize becoming as successful as he did. And he even kind of wore it poorly, didn't he? But yet, their band launched 1,000 ships of people believing that that is how to be. That is how to be wealthy. That is how to be successful. Everybody, essentially, until prog rock, everybody who's in a band emulates the Beatles' paradigm, you know? So the fact that everything, obviously, boomers never had a conceptualization of archons or an understanding of Gnosticism. Very few, fewer than 100 probably, have any grasp on what Gnosticism is. But being that I believe that it's the religion of the elite, you will see many, many, many more people grasping it. And what will wax and wane here, what will wane is the sweet, kind, nice spirit that came with Christianity being assumed true. The humble sweetness that comes with that. It's a sad thing to lose, but that's life.